Hey guys, happy Friday. Welcome back. Just gonna close the window really quick, rather, not the door. It's been a bit hot here in Europe. We're having a heat wave, so just melting, no AC over here. But besides that, I hope you've had a great week. Things are progressing. We are in week 2 of August. Just as a reminder, the theme for August is healing the inner child. And this week the theme is reparenting your inner child. Today, we're going to be listening to a short portion of a video by Dr. Snipes. I thought to introduce her, we looked in the beginning of this week at Nicole Lepera, and Dr. Snipes is another excellent psychologist with lots of experience around reparenting and all of the other related issues. You can click on the link in the show notes to watch the video in its entirety. It's a presentation, so she has a slideshow that she does for all of her videos. So I do highly recommend it. She has outstanding experience, and I really hope to encourage you to learn more from these other researchers who have spent a lot of their time on the academic side putting in the work to understand our situation, because most therapists don't understand what they're doing. Most therapists don't know what they're doing. They're unqualified, and they don't even have the integrity or respect for you or themselves or their profession to admit that. I'm thinking to have another discussion on that in particular, because it is really a challenging problem. It's something that I've been facing repeatedly. I just had to send another few emails today to try to clarify some things or to get some things in motion, because I am so tired of having to work with people who don't know what they're doing, people who don't have experience with CPTSD or the process of reparenting, of not being seen, heard, accepted, believed from the people who are supposed to help you, right? And that's something that, if you're coming from a background where you need reparenting, you're going to need some extra oomph to be able to stand up for yourself. And I feel so proud for myself that I put my foot down, because the GP, bullshit in circles. The director of this facility, bullshit in circles. This coach, bullshit in circles. Not even a therapist, and it's really just a joke. A year later, I told from the first appointment, since I went there in September, since I had some new things come up last June, I told him I need to be working 2 times a week with a CPTSD specialist. We are a year later. They have done nothing but spend time on random meetings, not making any progress towards the 2 challenges and goals that I'd set. And in addition to that, after a whole freaking year, when in the very first appointment I told them I needed a CPDS specialist, they have now referred me to a PTSD specialist. And so it's there comes a point where you need to get access to that rage, because if you don't have access to your rage and your fucking anger, you're never going to be able to put a boundary down to respect yourself, because these are trained professionals who have apparent qualifications, education, and apparently valuable experience. It is all worthless. I have had multiple meetings per month with psychiatrists, with this coach who is the main case manager, with the director of the facility, with various psychologists also there on their team, with at least 3 different psychiatrists, or maybe one is a nurse practitioner. So imagine all of the money that they have spent for a year, the Dutch government, and I'm also preparing to send a letter to the Dutch government, because this is fucking disgusting. Like, if you want to talk about saving money and efficiency, this is fucking disgusting. I came with 2 specific goals. We have not made any progress at all. We are spinning circles, and they don't even respond to the core need of the issue, which is an extremely serious issue and requires specialized help. And for these apparently qualified people to not even have the intelligence, the respect, or the integrity. I'm getting quite impassioned, because I know I'm not the only one hearing this or experiencing this moment. And I really am trying to bring up some intensity to encourage you to look at your own life, because we don't have time to waste with incompetent people who don't care about the job, who don't care about us, or who don't know what the fuck they're doing. You have to get access to that energy to be able to stand up for yourself and put a boundary down. It is absolutely necessary, and I cannot wait to write a letter to this Dutch government to explain how much waste has been done. How many thousands, tens of thousands of euros have been wasted over this past year for all these different meetings, for them to still refer me to an incorrect treatment for the wrong diagnosis. It's disgusting. And in a country as efficient as the Netherlands, something that I love about this country, I love the efficiency of the Netherlands, but this is disgusting. I'm lucky that I have a brain that I can think and reflect and challenge, because how many people's lives has this place ruined? They barely have 2 stars on Google. Now, this is a public service facility, of course, right? So these people normally don't really care about their jobs. They're not the most educated. The salary is not the highest, so they're not that motivated. These people really don't care. They just come and push some buttons and go home and get their paycheck. They don't really give a fuck about their patients or their job or their career. It's a very different kind of mindset in Europe than in the US. And I'm not saying everyone here is like that, but particularly in the public service, people don't care. They're just there to get their paycheck and go home and do whatever. They don't care about their jobs. So they don't care about your life. They don't even dare respect it. So why am I bringing this up? Because I wanted to make a specific video about this, and I'm going to make another video to go at this in detail. But I wanted to bring this up before we get started on this reparenting lecture. Because when you're going into something so deep, especially if you have an absent father or a narcissistic father and emotionally unavailable mother, you have that 2 combo. There is so much work to be done, and you do not have time to waste sitting with somebody who is incompetent, who doesn't know what they're doing, sending you around in circles. I know people who have been in therapy from my other support programs, older people, for 20 years, 15 to 20 years in therapy every freaking week, paying $100 to $150, sometimes more per week. And the therapist has never even once told them that reparenting is the issue. Again, part of the reason why I started this project, because it is freaking disgusting to spend that much money, and the therapist is so uninformed, who lacks so much care for their profession and their patients, who lacks the integrity to admit that they cannot help a client, especially a private therapist who is just basically trying to get as much recurring billing patients as they can. It's always a incentive problem here, because you're paying them for this help. So what incentive do they actually have to help you get better? So they lose a paying client, especially when they build a good relationship with, right? So they're not really incentivized to help you at all. At all. And I really do mean that from the majority of stances. I mean, I think that you will find some good people, mostly therapists who have their own lived experience, not just some basic bitch, to be honest, who just read a textbook. Okay, bitch, I can read a textbook also. And I also have the lived experience. So I just want to remind you to take so much care and be so careful. Protect yourself, protect your time, protect your resources, protect your self-respect. Because after this devastation of childhood abandonment, neglect, abuse, we need to be seen, we need to be heard, and most of all, we need to be validated and believed. It is a bare minimum that even this place has not been able to provide, and it is disgusting. It is truly disgusting that the Dutch government has wasted thousands of dollars on these meetings. It is beyond disgusting. Truly beyond disgusting. And I know we're starting off a little bit hot on a Friday. Normally I try to, bring some levity, fun, focusing on joy on Fridays, fun Friday. But this week is something that came up to me that needs to be said. It needs to be discussed. It needs to be expressed, communicated. And people need to be able to protect and respect themselves. And so, with that little bit out of the way, and hopefully a serious reminder for you to take it seriously, who you're working with, to make sure they're qualified, to make sure you're vetting them. I know you can be so overwhelmed, so stressed with so much going on, under pressure from maybe lack of resources or support or whatever, but please take your time and do not waste your precious resources, your time, your money, your energy on people who don't know what they're doing and people who don't even have the integrity to admit that they cannot help you. You deserve better than that. And so now, as we progress with the rest of this episode today, we're going to be listening to a video by Dr. Snipes, which is basically covering some CBT skills that can help with reparenting, although this is a broader introduction to reparenting, different facets, different strategies to advance. If you click on the link in the show notes, you will go to her YouTube page, and she has much other content on reparenting as well as related topics. Just as a reminder, she does have slideshows, presentations for all of her videos. So if you're wanting to get a closer look, to have some visual aspect, I do recommend that you check that out. So without further ado, let's go ahead and listen to Dr. Snipes.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to this presentation on healing the inner child. I'm your host, Dr. Dawn-Elise Snipes. In this presentation, we're going to learn about the inner child. We'll identify examples of behaviors that can traumatize the inner child and impacts of that trauma on the inner child. We'll then move on to looking at core issues faced by many people with a wounded inner child and finish up by exploring strategies to begin healing that inner child. So who are we talking about here? Well, when children are wounded or traumatized and cannot get comfort, they often withdraw. Well, when that happens, the wound either doesn't heal correctly or it stays open. And a lot of times here we're talking about emotional wounds. But it's important to recognize that emotional wounds are just as problematic as physical wounds. When a similar situation arises in the future, the child still does not have an effective way to deal with it, and they still feel unsafe. This may lead to the development of unhealthy behaviors to prevent rejection or abandonment and try to stay as safe as possible. Unfortunately, a lot of times the people who enact these traumatizing behaviors are the caregivers, and that can create a lot of chaos because the child gets confused. They have this caregiver that's supposed to protect them and love them unconditionally, but they're engaging in all of these hurtful behaviors. Some of these behaviors, physical or emotional withdrawal or abandonment. Now, sometimes that can be because the caregiver has a mental health issue or an addiction issue. You know, there are things that can prevent the caregiver from being able to be physically or emotionally present. But the child doesn't understand that. And it's important to help the child process that in order to prevent it from being a problem. But in this situation, you know, the caregiver is either physically or emotionally absent, or they intentionally withdraw. So if the child doesn't act the way the caregiver wants, the caregiver may storm out of the house or emotionally withdraw and give the child the cold shoulder and not talk to them for 2 or 3 days. And the child feels very anxious at that point in time because they know somewhere back in their primitive brain that they rely on this caregiver to survive. Other behaviors include shaming and criticizing when the child doesn't do things right, when the child isn't perfect, when the child doesn't live up to the caregiver's ideals and expectations. There's constructive feedback, but when the behavior when the information is shaming and criticizing, especially if it humiliates the child, maybe they are shamed and criticized in front of other people, or they are regularly shamed and criticized so the child doesn't feel like they can do anything right, which makes them fear rejection, which makes them fear abandonment. Blaming and guilting is another behavior that can wound a child because, and this happens when a parent blames the child for how they feel. You know, it's your fault that I'm stressed out all the time, or it's your fault that your father and I broke up. Guilting the child. We would be able to pay the rent if we didn't have to get you new shoes every 3 weeks. There are a lot of things that caregivers can say that can make the child feel like it's their fault that things are bad, which again makes them fear rejection and abandonment. You know, if I'm making things really bad for you, when is it that you're just going to cut me loose? Teasing, laughing at, or belittling the child for making mistakes, for failures, or even for exhibiting emotions can make them feel self-conscious and unsafe. Manipulating the child for their own gain can also be a very toxic behavior. Betraying the child. If they say that I'm going to be at your recital and then they don't show up. And this isn't just a one-time thing. It's a regular, I make a promise and I fail to keep it. Or I tell you that I'm going to keep something private. Maybe the child shared something very private with their caregiver, and then their caregiver goes and blabs it to the neighbors and to everybody else in the family. The child feels embarrassed, ashamed, self-conscious, unsafe. Patronizing and invalidating the child's feelings also can be very traumatizing. Caregivers are responsible for helping children learn how to identify and modulate their feelings and cope with life on life's terms. We're not born with those skills. And when a child comes to a caregiver and expresses their emotions and the caregiver belittles it and tells them that they're overreacting or ignores them or makes fun of them, then the child not only feels self-conscious and ashamed of their feelings, but they also still don't know how to deal with these overwhelming feelings they're having. Enmeshment is another example of a traumatizing behavior, and that's when the caregivers violate the child's emotional and mental boundaries and tell the child what they're going to do, what they're going to grow up to be, what they like, what they don't like, what they feel, etc. And it doesn't matter what the child says. The caregiver is very insistent about directing every aspect of the child's life. And that's very intrusive and again feels very unsafe because the message the child is receiving is your thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs don't matter. I will tell you what you're going to do. And conditional love. When a caregiver withholds love from a child when the child doesn't behave appropriately or when the child doesn't do what the caregiver wants, that is extremely damaging because withholding love is tantamount to abandonment and rejection. So think about which behaviors did your caregivers use and in what ways do you use them now? And you may be thinking, what? I don't want to. We learn what we live. And if your caregivers responded in a certain way, for example, if one of your caregivers, whenever they didn't get their own way, they stormed out, or if your caregivers never talked about feelings or invalidated one another's feelings, then you may have picked up those behaviors because those were the only ones you were taught. Now, you can learn other behaviors, but it's important to recognize which patterns you have, which default patterns you have that you learned from your family of origin, that you learned in order to help you stay safe. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a healthy pattern of behavior. So it's important to check those. Think of situations in which these things happen to you. They may not have all happened to you, but some of them may have. What would have been a more nurturing response? So if you came home one day and you were telling your caregiver about breaking up with your first love, and you felt completely overwhelmed and devastated, which most people do when they break up with their first love, and the caregiver either ignored it or minimized it and said, oh, that's puppy love, just ignore it, you'll be fine tomorrow, or whatever they said, but they didn't take you seriously. They didn't validate your feelings. They didn't help you figure out, okay, what do I do with this, swirling ball of emotion? Then you were probably left feeling very unsafe and emotionally abandoned. So the question is, what would you rather them have done? Envision them responding appropriately. And this will give you clues about how you need to respond to yourself now. So when you start feeling in the present, when you start feeling overwhelmed, like you've got this huge ball of swirling emotions, what can you tell yourself? How can you validate those feelings? And how can you deal with it? What is a more nurturing response that you can do? Because ultimately, you're probably going to have to do something that we call reparenting.
Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed a introduction to this lecture. Excuse me. It's just over an hour long, so we've only listened to a portion of it. So I recommend that you check it out and listen to its entirety. Again, do some more browsing. If you check out also the links in the show notes, there's a hyperlink over her name, and you can go directly to her website. We can find out more about her career, her research, the different programs and offerings that she has. Again, I am not working on this program to give you guys a solution, because I don't have the freaking solution to reparenting. I mean, I know the process that needs to be done, but I'm not trying to be some guru giving you the answers. My hope with this is to leave a paper trail of resources so that people can be empowered enough, to follow this paper trail, or at least to use some of these resources as a catalyst on their own process of healing, self-discovery, and self-expansion, because it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. But this was something that was really missing when I was in the beginning of my journey. I had no idea what the heck was going on. I had to find this out all on my own from basically the Adult Child podcast with Andrea. And no therapist knew this. No therapist knew of this process of reparenting, how it works, what was needed, the types of challenges. So it's such a lack of awareness and understanding, training, that I had to work to put something together for myself to document my progress, to stay on track. It's a way for me to continue to be engaged in some community efforts, to do something kind for others, to give back, and to bring some light to the world, because there have been a lot of things going on lately in the world, and I know everyone is having a hard time. So if you're in the process of reparenting, that's already a heavy burden. On top of everything else, the least that I can do for myself and for others is to leave this paper trail of resources that you can use on your own time to do your own self-investigation and analysis. Again, I don't have a solution for you. I'm not trying to sell you a solution. I'm simply offering a paper trail of resources that you can use on your own self-exploration journey, because most of these therapists don't know what they're doing. And again, I'm going to make another video on that quite soon. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the beginning of this video, this introduction. I hope you'll check the rest of it out on the weekend. Despite the heaviness of the topic, don't forget to have fun and try to find your way back to joy, levity, the releasing of the stress and tension, right? This is the sign that our nervous system is returning to a calm place, that we're returning to our ventral vagal safe and connected state. So thanks again for being here. I hope you have a great Friday, a great weekend. Take care of yourself. Don't forget to have fun. Follow your joy. And I'll see you again on next week, on Monday. And don't forget to check out the fairy tale coming out this weekend. You can find that on YouTube in case you're not following us there. Cheers, and take care, guys.